There were many ways to start the school year, but entering fourth period in handcuffs was a pretty dramatic way to do it. About 24 sets of eyes were focused on me as I stood in the doorway, waiting for campus security to finish speaking with my coma teacher. I hoped I looked somehow stoic as I waited for Miss Whitlock to allow me into her classroom, but it was hard to look badass while wearing my pajamas. The dark plaid pants weren't horrible, nor was the black slogan tee. But the dirty sloth slippers I was sporting, and the fact that I hadn't brushed my hair was diabolical. Thankfully, I'd remembered to remove my pimple patches and retainer along the journey, but there wasn't much to be done about the beehive that sat on top of my head. Taking me straight to Night Academy was to be expected, but forcing me straight to class was pure evil. It was done deliberately, and I knew that. They wanted to embarrass me, to make this whole process as horrific as possible, so I wouldn't dare to disobey them again, and I refused to let them have the satisfaction. If they wanted psychological warfare, I'd give it to them so hard they'd beg me to wear lubricant next time. But of course, right now, my hands were a little tied. All I could do was stand here and watch as Miss Whitlock huffed as she debated with security, saying she couldn't change her whole lesson plan for one student. Her features wrinkled, making her appear older than she was as she mumbled on about this being a waste of everyone's time. But I mentally argued that this whole subject was a waste of time. Cursed objects and magical artifacts. Would anyone ever actually need this crap in the real world? My jaw remained tight as I tried not to focus on the students staring and leaning towards their neighbor to whisper gossip. I was no stranger to the things people said about me and my family, nor was I blind to the rumors floating around about my great escape, ranging from kidnap to murder and being impregnated with some hybrid baby in a forbidden star-crossed romance. Either way, I tried to look fierce as I was ushered into the room. I eyed the familiar tall pillars and sandstone walls, their once warm tones now seeming cold and unwelcoming under the harsh fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the weight of a dozen silent stares, each pair of eyes drilling into me with quiet scrutiny. The shuffle towards the back of the classroom seemed to last a lifetime. As I moved up the aisle, I felt like I was on death row, but perhaps that was wishful thinking. The closest guard pulled out my chair. The scrape of metal against the stone floor echoed too loudly, only making the scene that much more of a spectacle. And then I was finally released from my handcuffs and sank into my chair. Right, now that that's been sorted, said Miss Whitlock, we shall continue with. She rambled on as she turned towards the giant blackboard at the front of the classroom, scribbling something that might as well have been hieroglyphs. I tuned her out with ease. Instead, I focused on the desks, rigid and unyielding, as they stood in perfect rows like soldiers at attention. Faint carvings, initials, curses, desperate messages were etched into the wood, speaking of past frustrations. Reminders of others who had sat here, trapped under the same heavy atmosphere. I'd only been gone 5 months, but that might as well have been 5 years in academy time. Slowly, I started to suss out the people who currently sat perched at those desks. Unlike in the human world, the cool kids didn't sit at the back. They sat at the front, on the side closest to the door, and it was no surprise to find Elysium Darkwood seated there. She sat with her chair turned sideways, so her desk was to her right, and her back placed towards the wall as she swung on her chair and faced the class and teacher at an angle. Her pack of wolves sat in the row behind her, not beside her, but with how she was turned on her chair, they might as well have been next to her. Everyone else in the room faced forwards, sat in their chairs properly, except for her, like it was some kind of odd show of dominance. And on the other side of the room, which was a surprise, sat Grace Heartstone. She was the beta she-wolf and formerly Elysium's best friend, but right now she sat slouched in her chair, with her hood on as she scribbled in a notebook. They were such good friends, since what seemed like the dawn of time, I had no idea what had shifted between them. But I did have my suspicions on what might cause such a strain on such a close friendship. The only thing that could truly damage it. Boy troubles. A quick glance in Valor's direction confirmed as much. He was seated in the heart of the room, between both girls, who were on either side, and a quick glance at his aura, or more specifically the attraction lines within it, showed that both girls liked him, and that he liked both of them. But that wasn't the juicy part. The juicy part was that his sigil, the sign that destined him to be with someone, didn't link to either one of those girls, and they likely all had no idea about any of it. Unlike with my kind, werewolves couldn't see auras, nor could they read attraction like we could. Of course, it was considered ill-mannered to eavesdrop on people's affairs, but what was the point in having this gift if not to use it? And with the upcoming mating ritual, there was even more reason. Tensions were likely running high, and sure, sometimes in rare cases people could change their sigil, but it happened once in a blue moon. Simply put, love was a lucky dip, and you got who you got. Soulmating wasn't known for being particularly kind, despite what people thought. People often fantasized about love being this beautiful fairy tale thing, but the reality of it was that love was gritty and dirty, and often led you towards the person you least expected. Soulmates weren't often brought into one's life to be kind, but to teach and guide and make a person move and grow, to challenge. Soulmates were teachers brought into your life to challenge, and I was thankful that I couldn't see my own sigil, and therefore, I had no clue what asshole was waiting for me. Not that I felt like it would matter in my case. It was supposed to, but being one of the last purebred succubuses in existence, I figured saving our bloodlines would take precedence over fate. Marissa? Shit. Chairs squeaked, and all those eyes returned to me once more. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in, asked Miss Whitlock. I stared at the chalkboard, something about hotspots that were best for enchanting mystical objects. Nope. I'm okay just listening for now. Well, if you were listening, you'd know that I just asked you what time lunch is. A few people laughed. I realize you had an exciting past few months, she said, but you're back at school now, which means you should have your textbook in front of you and be paying attention, you more than anyone. As current, you have 0 participation for this semester, which is over 50% of your grade, and a hell of a lot of ground to make up in several classes. So unless you want to end up failing and repeating this class alongside your little sister, I strongly suggest you not only pay attention, but actively try to succeed. Otherwise, you may end up stuck here at Night Academy, taking my class forever. My eyebrows pinched together. I could not think of a worse hell. Worse, she just stared at me, like she was waiting for some kind of answer. I don't have anything, was all I could think to muster. If you don't have the textbooks for your classes, or the right supplies, borrow them from your neighbor or the library or front office. Be proactive. Honestly, it's not rocket science, dear. This is all basic knowledge that even small children know. I hated this place.